Hello everyone, it is Tuesday here at the Breakfast Club and I am your host, Sister Danger. I wanted to start off by first saying goodbye to Landon. I didn't get to see or interact with very many of your videos, but life sometimes gets the best of all of us, and I hope that wherever your adventures may take you, they are good ones. And also then to give a welcome to Landon's replacement, who is Nathyn Brendan Masters. And I don't know very much about you, but I look forward to learning. I am actually here in the Northeast United States, sort of away on quasi work vacation. I'm doing a lot of show-related things while I'm out here in Connecticut, actually, for this particular video. So I'm filming somewhat on the fly. I did go and research a little bit this morning about the topic that Kizzume has brought up. Suffice it to say, I don't have all my normal resources, and so this is just a lot of improvisational talk for the most part, and pulling from my knowledge base that I already have. Thank you, Kizzume, for standing in for Peach and for such an excellent topic, and thank you Got That Funk, for your input on it yesterday. To reiterate the topic, it's online bullying and harassment, and I think this is a fantastic topic with a lot to unpack. I'm going to sort of unpack it, I guess, in my own way. And there were a lot of questions that Kizzume asked in this, and so if I don't exactly respond to all of the questions, I hope that what I do respond to makes sense and still manages to address the overall topic of this week's conversation. So, online bullying and harassment, and Kizzume asked some questions such as, when does online activity become harassment and bullying? Where is that line that gets crossed? He asked about whether or not we've ever used these tactics, if we found them successful. And so I'm gonna start first, I think, so I have some notes here. That's why I keep looking down, but I'm going to start first with what is bullying and harassment, because I think that giving some sort of definition to these ideas will help put into context everything that is about to come afterward. I consider bullying and harassment different things, and you're going to find me leaning here a lot on how the law would look at these particular turns of phrase. I think it's actually rather important, because the reason that I sort of circle back to what's going on legally is because that's what's actionable in our society, in any sort of real sense of following up on with somebody if they were committing a crime, or if there was some sort of abusive situation. What's actionable is what the law considers to be bullying or harassment. Outside of that, the only real action that exists is the action of social pressure, and that is sort of its own separate topic. So bullying is this whole area, actually, in legally speaking, is an extremely emerging area, and it is not well defined very well across the board. So please take some of this with some room with some elbow room, right? So bullying, I guess that I would consider this to be a sort of activity that is subjective according to the viewpoint of the person being bullied. That anything could be considered insulting or offensive or bullying when we are speaking only within the realm of words, not within the realm of physical activity. So there's a differentiation there. There's this line that is crossed when we pass over from words and start taking actions against somebody other than just talk. In the realm of words, what is considered bullying is basically as unique as every single individual who would be receiving that type of behavior. Now, what is considered harassment? I think this begins to cross into the realm of physical activity. One of the interesting things about harassment as a general term is that it is not limited to just the words that somebody has said. We don't consider, if I were to say, you know, oh man, I'm gonna kill you, right? We don't consider those words harassment in and of themselves. And so that which constitutes harassment, I think, is more a collection of sort of an amalgamation of different elements in a scenario. It isn't just words, because people say things like this to each other all the time, both in writing on the internet and in real life. You know, your buddies and your chums, and you say things like, you know, you're playing a game or whatever, and you're like, man, I'm gonna fuck you up, right? People say things like that, and we know that they are not harassing us, right? But the reason that we know that is not because of the words they said, but because of a greater context. We have a situational context, like what is going on around us at the time. Where are you? What activity are you engaging in? You know, what is the person's attitude and demeanor at the time of saying these things? And when we're talking about just words, those exact same words, if you take all the context away, could then be given any context placed upon them. If you were to just read those words, you don't necessarily know whether or not a person is being mean or spiteful or whatever it is. That they could be anything, essentially. And therefore, we wouldn't consider just the words to constitute harassment. Harassment is a sort of pattern of behavior that gives a reasonable person cause for fear or concern for their personal well-being. And so we're talking about a consistent threatening behavior, something that is passing beyond the realm of words and actually giving you cause for concern for either your family, your home, your property, your person in some way, shape, or form. And usually that would come also with some sort of context as well. For example, you know, if you were, I had an experience happen to me once in London, actually. I was walking in Camden Market, and this guy, I didn't even realize, I was with a buddy of mine, and we're walking in Camden Market, and this guy starts following me, and he's just shouting obscenities and insults. I didn't realize that he was actually following me and doing this because I had not said anything to this person at all in passing them. I was just walking down the street, and then my buddy says, hey, I think that guy is yelling at you. And I said, after a minute of letting him follow some more, I said, oh my gosh, I think you're right. I think he's following me and yelling weird things at me. But then on second thought, you know, this guy that's doing this, it looks kind of like a crazy street person, right? There was no previous interaction or altercation, and so I would never consider a situation like this harassment. There's actually somebody who might be mentally ill and not in their right mind following along me, engaging in what could be considered harassing behavior. But because of the context of the situation, you just sort of realize that this is a weird, crazy person, you know, a street person or whatever that's, I guess, just following you. And so, I mean, I just handled it by turning around and asking the guy if there was a problem. And he immediately turned around and wandered off and kept doing the same thing whilst walking away, and then that was the end of it. And, so I don't think that in any real context this could be constituted as harassment, right? Because there are more elements than just words that go into that. And I think that it's really important to keep that in mind. Now, with kind of that context for these words in mind, bullying and insults or being insulted, what is offensive, all these things are as unique as the individual. And harassment is a much more particular term that speaks to a broader context of things that are going on. So with that in mind, one of the questions that Kizzume asked was, do we think that there can be a benefit to bullying and insulting? Do I think there can be a benefit? Yes. But the benefit is not because of the actions of the instigator. It is because of the power of the recipient of that behavior to decide how they want to react to and deal with what has occurred to them. It takes me back to one of my favorite quotes by Marcus Aurelius, which is to not have such an opinion as somebody who would do you wrong or as another person wants you to have, but instead to look at things as they are in truth. And I sort of, in my mind, I kind of couple this quote with the really famous Eleanor Roosevelt quote about how nobody can hurt you without your permission or do anything to you without your permission. What both of these things fundamentally speak to, in my mind, is that at the end of the day, whether or not something is good or bad, if it's painful or hurtful, all of those things are up to me as the recipient to decide. An action occurs, and that action could be that somebody took it upon themselves to call me bad names. This is nothing more than an action that has occurred, and I then, as a part of this equation, my opinions and thoughts, my feelings, then become superimposed onto this action, and based on my life experiences and whatever, I then come to this sort of conclusion that this was a good thing or a bad thing or a hurtful thing. But at the end of the day, all of that is ultimately decided by me. To give an example, which isn't particularly bullying or anything, but more about the power of what we do and how we perceive situations, because I really very much believe that, kind of back to that whole selfist philosophy, right, that these situations and those things that are constituted as bullying, etc., these are all within my power to determine, regardless of what somebody intends for them. I am not bound ever to perceive or to react or to accept somebody's insult as insulting. I don't have to be insulted by that. I don't have to be angered by it or anything, really. I can choose how I want to receive those things. Coming at it from that perspective, I find very little in life, personally speaking, to be bullying or I guess insulting. Not to say that people don't say mean things. People say really ridiculous things all the time on my YouTube channel, but they're irrelevant. All that really they're doing is flagging themselves as another YouTube user or commentator on a Facebook page, or they're just flagging themselves as somebody with which not to engage. They aren't doing anything that transgresses into the really real world, and so they can talk and talk and talk and say whatever mean words they feel like they need to say all day long, and it is irrelevant to me. And I actually think that it's really important that people learn the skill of disassociating, you know, of understanding that there's a kind of a wall, there's a barrier between what other people are doing and how you are receiving it. When somebody goes out of their way to, you know, say insulting things or make comments about your appearance, etc., etc., if you feel personally attacked by that, then that's all on you, right? If that were to make me feel self-conscious that somebody said something about that, that's all on me. And the only resolution to that ever is that I look inside myself and determine why is it that I feel self-conscious when somebody does this, and really wrestle internally with my own self until when these things happen, I've come to some sort of, you know, peaceful state of mind or whatever, and these things no longer bother me. Anything short of that is still ultimately setting up a little paradigm in which, in some way, shape, or form, another person will have power over your individual, because you have set down a barrier, which, if it is to be transgressed, they now are still going to have the ability to hurt and harm not your person but your feelings, and the only person that ever has any control over that at the very, very end of the day is you yourself. Because of that, I don't think of very many things as bullying, and I guess I have a very high bar for that. I just consider people saying mean and terrible things, people basically outing themselves as not very tolerant or bigoted or not very intelligent. I don't know. I don't know what they are. Maybe they're those things. Maybe they're having a really bad day. Maybe they are just somebody who likes to go around on the internet and troll places because they're bored. Who knows what they are? But they're flagging for me that there's somebody that I don't really need to engage with. You know, unless I want to go ahead and, you know, get into a tit for tat with some trolls or something like that. So, I mean, I guess I do have that option, but do you use these tactics? No, I do not use these tactics. I actually find it, as I was just saying, you know, when somebody behaves in this fashion, they're sort of flagging to me that they are somebody that I really don't need to trouble myself with over much and engage with. I do not use these tactics because I find it incredibly disrespectful to another person to use pejorative at them, to hit them with logical fallacies, to presume the meaning in their words as opposed to just taking their words at the value and the meaning that those words have. I think it is really incredibly déclassé, really, to yell at another person. It's inappropriate. And it is especially inappropriate in any kind of discussion or debate that is going on to engage in this type of behavior. It doesn't make points, and it is clearly an attempt to incite. However, I do agree, really kind of, I guess, hardcore, that other people have the right to say whatever they want. And that it is incredibly important that I defend their right to say whatever they want, no matter how terrible I may personally find that statement, no matter how personally jarring or attacking of me that is, that if I should ever want the ability to say whatever I want to say, potentially, that I must always and absolutely must be very fervent and vigilant about protecting the rights of people to say even mean and terrible things. And this kind of harkens back to why I think it's so important that we learn how to disengage our own personal selves from the mean things that people may say. Because the most important, I guess the higher or more important value, just in a sense of humanity and life, is that of free speech. And that you cannot have free speech except for don't make fun of handicapped people, don't make fun of Irish people. That isn't free speech. You can't have free speech except for that if you say that, then you're going to get fired from your job. That isn't free speech. That's a form of social pressure that's being used to stymie what somebody has to say, and I really disagree with it in a number of different ways, and it could probably be their own videos. Because of that, I don't think that it is ever appropriate to try to mitigate the actions of another person, at least within the realm of words. I don't think that it is acceptable. It's not something that I would do, to use these sort of shaming and bullying and mean tactics. I don't yell at people. I don't call people names. I don't use pejorative at them. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, how a person receives what I say, no matter how polite I am, is still up to their subjective opinion. They still could be hurt or insulted or whatever by it. And so even the best that I can do, because I'm not willing to cross the line of censorship and censoring them, because I don't want to be censored ever, and so what I think is the appropriate way to do that is to conduct myself and control my behavior and how I address people, and by being that type of example, I am in fact being, as what is it, the Gandhi quote, be the change that you want to see in the world. And when you do that, you are in fact changing things. You're changing your corner of things. And you are, in doing that, demonstrating that there are other ways for people to try to make their voices heard or to engage and interact with one another. You are a living example of that. And so that is what I think the appropriate response is when it comes to the idea that using shaming tactics causes people to change their mind. And people changing their mind is kind of its own topic anyway. So my general experience in life is that people rarely change their mind anywhere there on the spot. And they have to go off and they have to digest and let things percolate. They maybe want to do their own research or whatever it is. And their minds slowly change over time. They don't change no matter how polite or how rude or insulting or how well reasoned your argument is. In part, I think, because there's kind of a stigma against being wrong. There's a stigma in our society against not knowing the answers to things. People don't want to be shown up. It's kind of an ego blow to be wrong about something, and people are embarrassed by it. So even if they did suspect that maybe they should be thinking about something else, or maybe they should change their mind, the chances that they're going to do it right there, then and there, maybe while there's another audience, are pretty slim, and again, this is just my experience of dealing with people, but how many times have you known people to kind of go off and take a thing into consideration and say, you know, you said this one thing to me a really long time ago, and I thought about it, or I went and studied it, and eventually their opinions sort of evolve. And I think that's kind of how opinions and people's perspectives are. Rather than just sort of this light switch flip-flop change, they're much more of an evolution, you know, thoughts, and they build upon one another. They don't just flip-flop or change overnight or in the course of a single debate or argument. I'm not actually sure if I can cut this video on YouTube and edit it, so it's gone on kind of long, but I hope that gives some context to my perspective on this. You know, in short, I really don't think that within the sphere of just words, I really don't think that things like bullying exist, and to the extent that they do, I would qualify them as actions of another person, and it is my perspective on those actions that makes it bullying or not bullying. And since at the end of the day I'm the one who's in control of that, then I am the one who can learn for myself how to not let those things bother or bully me. So, but what, you know, once we cross outside of that realm, say into the realm of trying to get people in trouble at their jobs, or stalking them at their home, you know, or other things that would impact their livelihood, now I definitely think that we're into a bigger realm of, you know, harassment and stalking and, you know, potential assault. Those things all come with their sort of own little, you know, own little packaged definitions that I actually think is really helpful to understand, you know, understand those words differently and what goes into, you know, what goes into those words. So I know that some of the examples that were brought up have to do with people hopping onto YouTube channels and just leaving scads and scads and scads of, you know, mean comments and comments about appearance and, you know, all kinds of insults. And to my mind, none of that is anything that I would personally consider even worth my time to be worried about. So, whew, this video has gone on for a really long time, and I guess though that I will just sort of wrap it up by saying thank you, Kizzume, for bringing up a really cool topic. I hope that, you know, I sort of explained my stance on that a little bit. I think it's a really complicated and convoluted issue with a lot of nuance, and so it can, you know, there's a lot going on, and it's not very easy to cover in a short period of time. Anyway, please tune in tomorrow, and I guess since Nathyn is replacing Landon, then we'll get to hear him on his first round robin. And I bid everybody good week, and until next time, thank you for watching The Breakfast Club. Bye-bye, everybody.